Hello folks, it's the 24th of August. No, not walking the dog, actually doing a lot of yard work. That's right, I have a yard, not a small yard, and I do yard work. Today I'm going to discuss the new law in more detail, what it actually means. I did an article and it was published on the Patreon site for ESW, Exit Strategy World. That article had a lot of background on immigration in general, but I'm going to be more specific, and I'm going to be more specific toward Americans, just because I know these laws a bit better. So, but it still applies for most everybody else. And yes, like I said, we do yard work. In Russia, you can have pretty big yards, just like in rural America or suburban America. You can't really say that for the Germans and the French and the English, where they don't own the land. The English in particular, they don't own the land. It's all crown land, as far as I remember, except for a few exceptions. You just got, 99-year rental. That automatically renews until the government says it doesn't renew, and takes your land away and tells you to pick up your house and go wherever the hell you want to go. In Russia, you own the land. So foreigners, by the way, are allowed to buy land in Russia. You can own any land except two key exceptions. You cannot own agricultural land if you're a foreigner. You can own a house on a farm and the land right around that house as a homestead. That you can own, but you can't own the farm. The farmland, the agricultural land, is a 49-year lease. Now, if you get citizenship, and you damn well better if you're going to stick around that long, then you can have the option of buying that land. So, in the end, you can't own that land, especially if it's government land the government gives you a 49-year lease on. If it's private land that you're leasing, well, it's up to the owner. If it's government land, when you get that citizenship, almost always in the clause, and the rental clause is an option to buy. So you can buy that land and become a landowner, become part of the landed society. Actually, home ownership in Russia, home apartment ownership of flats, is well over 70%. So yes. Most people own at least the roof over their heads, even if the roof over your head is the floor of somebody else in a big apartment building, but you still own that property. Property ownership is a very big thing in Russia, unlike what most Americans and Westerners still think we're communists or some other crap like that. You guys are the actual something between communists and Nazis these days, in your police states that are cracking down on everything. Yes, I can like posts that are that are against government policies. No, you can't call for a revolt, obviously. No country is going to particularly tolerate that. And no, I'm not going to go, you can't support the Zelensky Nazi regime, dictatorial regime, unelected in all manner. And even their parliament loses its eligibility on the 27th of August, so in 3 days, when it no longer has its mandate. Mandate runs out. And since there's no elections in parliament either, because the Nazis in the parliament don't feel like being reelected or standing for election, because it probably wouldn't be reelected if it was anything like fair elections, they're just going to keep them staying in power, just like their dictator. And as long as the anti-human regimes in D.C., London, Paris, Berlin, and so on are behind them, they have nothing to worry about. But now you do. Because if you haven't noticed, there's been a whole list of people that have been raided, have gone under the knife, basically, all over the West. Journalists, other people critical of the regime. The regimes are in destruction mode. They're not going to tolerate anything. England is well ahead of the rest. 2.5 years for liking something. Between 2 to 5 years, if you like a post that's critical of the government, and you are the wrong demographic, that is, you're English, you're Christian, you're the wrong demographic. You're the unneeded demographic. And Americans are heading in the same demographic. So why are you going to stick around until you literally either are in a re-education camp or you're face down in the mud being buried to be fertilizer for something? I mean, seriously, you want that for your kids? Well, Russia's opened the door. Previously, first of all, this isn't citizenship. Let's just get that straight. This is a temporary residency that's for 3 years. And in those 3 years, you have to apply for a permanent residency. Permanent residency, you don't have to give up your previous citizenship. Permanent residency is permanent. It doesn't have an end date. You have to redo at 60, I think you have to redo the pictures and the paperwork for residency. But then again, everybody with passports at 60 have to redo it too. So, and they will make your picture look like it's about 10 years older than you really are, or maybe 20. They're that good. like all government hacks behind the camera, they will make you look like shit, because I think that they've got a filter on there, make shit, and they make you look like shit. Okay, so I'm going off a little bit. So anyways, so previously anybody could file for temporary residency in Russia. But here's the catch. First of all, and this still applies, you have to be legally in the country when you file. So you have to be on a tourist visa, private visa, whatever kind of visa you want, business visa. You have to be legally within Russia. You can't go through an embassy or a consulate to file for residency. You have to be legally in Russia to file for residency. But then you run into quota systems. And the big cities have very small quotas compared to the number of people filing. So they have maybe like a 1% chance. In the countryside, it's better because there's just less people filing. So the quotas may be even smaller than, say, in Moscow or St. Petersburg or Ekaterinburg, for example, but you have a better chance overall. Plus, if you own a flat or a house, and it has to be a livable space. That is, it's already built, and you can go in, move in now, or already are living in it, and it passes obvious inspection, so you can't just put a shack on there and say, hey, I'm living here, or a piece of land with a tent. It doesn't work that way. Then you pretty much are good from the list, but the problem is you still have to have Russian language, at least basic knowledge of Russian language, to get to file for temporary residency. Now, if you're married to a Russian, you're the child of a Russian citizen, you're the parent of a Russian citizen. You just skip right past that into permanent residency, but you still have to show Russian knowledge. Or you can skip all of that if you can pass the test for Russian, carry the Russian language, but you damn well better be able to show Russian knowledge, because it is a high-level test. You watch a 30-minute video, and then you answer questions off that video. It'll be a documentary or something like that. So if you're not taking notes, even if you're fluent in Russian, you will fail, because you won't be able to remember half the questions. I mean, I went through that as a carrier of the Russian language, and I watched a video about New Year's, how it arrived, the New Year's celebrations in Russia. It was a documentary, 30-minute documentary. My wife was also watching it, and I told her, take notes. If you don't take notes, we're going to fail this. So we took notes and we passed. And then you have about a 15-minute conversation with a person. They call you up and you have a conversation. They had two Azerbaijanis who were sitting in front of us, and they were speaking pretty broken Russian to begin with. And after the video, they were just in total panic mode. I mean, they failed miserably because their Russian was not all that great to begin with. They didn't take notes. And after watching a 30-minute video, you are not going to pass, even if, I mean, it might as well be in English and you're an American or a Brit. You're probably going to fail anyways, because, again, it's a 30-minute video. If you're not taking notes, you're screwed. So don't even count on that unless you're really, really fluent in Russian. But that jumps you straight forward into getting citizenship past. You get permanent residency, and then within 6 months you file for citizenship. And in 3 months after that, you get citizenship. So, but that's a whole different route. So if you came in to get your temporary residency, sun's right in my eyes. Well, I'm not going to turn around because, no, I'm not going to geolocate myself. Individual trees are much harder to figure out where's what. Now, I got a raggedy shirt on. Like I said, I'm doing yard work. So, anyways, where was I? So anybody could come into the country and they could file for temporary residency. They had to be legally in the country when they filed for temporary residency. They would get called up for an interview in Russian. And no, you can't go through a translator because I just got to show that you're not capable. And then once you get that, you get on the list to file your paperwork. That's the permission to file your paperwork. Now, once you're filing your paperwork, you have to take a Russian language exam and pass it at least at a base level. Which, if you've studied Russian for at least 2 years, 3 years, you should be able to pass. A very base level. But if you haven't, you're barely learned the alphabet, don't even bother. There's no way in hell you're going to be able to read and answer questions, even the minimum of that. And that's also knowledge of base knowledge of Russian legal system. If you take Well, okay, I'm going to bother that because most Americans have never taken the American citizenship exam. There's actually some pretty decently difficult questions, but they never actually get asked. There's a whole long list, and 3/4 of those questions don't get asked. They just get the stupid questions asked, you know. And in America, when you're reading to prove English, you have to read a very short birthday card or something like that. Yeah, it's on that level. In Russian, no, it's a lot more difficult. So, what this allows is people that share Russia's conservative Christian values. You heard that, Christian values. Especially people with a lot of kids. We like big families. Yes, we do. They are able to come to Russia and file for residency without knowledge of Russian and without any quota system. So you come in there and you just file for residency. But again, you have to be legally in Russia. This isn't something you come to the Russian consulate and you go, hey, I want asylum. No, it doesn't work that way. Because this is a form of asylum. Now, once you get that residency, you have 3 years, and in those 3 years, you have to file for permanent residency, and that means you do have to pass a Russian exam. So if you think you're just going to sit around and do nothing with the language, well, first of all, the temporary residency allows you to work, but work only in that federal district, i.e., that province that you're registered in, with 3 exceptions. Sevastopol, St. Petersburg, and Moscow, which are separate federal territories. So if you're registered in the Moscow province, you can't work in Moscow. Same thing with St. Petersburg. If you're registered in Moscow, you can't work in the Moscow province. All the other provinces, you can work in the capital of the province and any other settlement city in that province. If you're doing business work, that's a whole different thing. You know, you can do business trips to a different area. That's not an issue. But you can't permanently work and be stationed or you have your office in an area that's not where you're registered on a temporary residence. Once you get permanent residency, you can work wherever you want to, and citizenship, obviously, too. Oh, and by the way, the land that you cannot own, besides agriculture, is land in the border districts. Border districts are normally particularly very border towns because even the ones without military bases are usually restricted to Russian citizens only. They don't want foreigners on the border for obvious reasons, especially considering everything the U.S. And the other Marxist Nazi regimes commit across the world. So that's safety precautions. Now, once you get to Russia, legally, you can file for temporary residency. Show that you're a traditional Christian family. If you only have one kid, but if you have many kids, it's even better. You're basically oppressed by the neoliberal regimes, and you are. Whether or not you realize it, you really are. And you should realize by now. Nobody in Russia is going to chop your boy's nuts off or convert your little girl into a man with a deep voice, with chemicals and anything else, or without chemicals or anything else. That's illegal. It is absolutely illegal in Russia. Now, in fact, any sexual propaganda is illegal for where minors are concerned, and that doesn't mean just homosexual or some of the other gender sexual or heterosexual, for that matter. If they're anywhere where children congregate, you cannot commit those kinds of acts. You can't put those kinds of commercials up. So no pride parades, obviously, can be allowed. And thank God for that. So anyways, once you've come to Russia, you can file for temporary residency. Once you get, so it takes about a month to find out that, well, since you're not going to be on a list, quota list, you go forward with that. But here's a couple catches. Now, there's some documents you need to prepare. And that month that you have between filing to file for temporary residency, being allowed to file temporary residency, putting your paperwork in, you're going to have to do a lot of running. I mean, that's just the case. First of all, before you leave the U.S., now, step back. Americans can get a 3-year multi-entry private visa or tourist visa. That gives you 180 days in country, 1 day out. So you can go to the Republic of Georgia, fly into the Republic of Georgia, get stamped in your passport, and the next morning fly back into Russia for another 180 days. So that's a big plus. Now, before you come to the U.S., to Russia from the U.S., you need to have a federal background check. That federal background check cannot be older than 30 days. Okay? Or I think 60 days, I'm sorry, for filing. Maybe it was 90 days. So it's somewhere around there, 60, 90 days. Just to understand, it's going to take you 30 days to get that and get it apostilled, because it has to be an apostille. Now, to get the actual document, you go on the FBI background check website. You can go $18 or $20 to the FBI, and it'll take 2 months, 3 months, because that's just how the FBI works. Or you can go one of the approved FBI companies, translation kickbacks to the FBI, and they can do it in 1 day. 2 days. They'll send you an email that you print out with your background check. Or a physical copy will come like within a week. And it'll cost you, of course, about $80, $90 per person. So, and then when you get to Russia, you also have to do a medical test. So if you have open felonies, serious misdemeanors, like not speeding tickets, but, serious stuff, you'll probably get denied. If you're a habitual drug user, you're not going to fly through. And without that background check, you're not going to fly through. A little hint, because the federal government in the U.S. being the shit show that it is, to get the federal apostille will take 3 months. So by the time you get it, that federal background check is worthless, right? Welcome to the U.S. government. And it'll cost you quite a bit too. But the Russian government has taken it from state apostles, like New York State. Apostle Please, and there's Apostle Quick. There's a bunch of services that'll do that. And they'll get it in front of a state apostle, and they'll apostolize that document within a week. So you can do it fast. Don't bother with the federal government. The federal government in the U.S. is a shit show. It's been a shit show since 2020, and it hasn't shown any desire to improve. And it probably won't. If anything else, knowing what these background checks are normally for and things like that, they'll only make it worse and more difficult. Because they're not in the interest of you having a happy life. They're in the interest of you paying for their happy lives with your taxes and hard-earned money and sweat of your brow. And definitely your blood. Believe it that. So once you get there, once you get the paperwork, you also you will need to translate any of your college or university or upper learning certificates. You will need to translate your birth certificates, your marriage certificate, and have it all not apostles, but good Lord. Not notarized. It has to be a Russian notary. It has to be translated in Russia and notarized in Russia. So you will be doing all that. So you got to have some money with you for that. Once you get all that paperwork in, then you can file for temporary residency. And again, in those 3 years, you will need to learn Russian. Now, as far as military service goes, nobody's going to draft you. But here's the big but: when you get citizenship, you have to, by law, register for call-up, if need be. There's several exclusions, obviously, for that. Age, if you're over 50, disqualifies you. Women don't have to do it. If you're an invalid, obviously you don't have to do it. Doesn't mean that you're going to get called right up and you're going to be sent somewhere. But when you get citizenship, that's something you have to do. And it should be, because people, if Russia is going to be your country, do your part on defending it if needs be. From the very people that you're fleeing, because those are the people trying to destroy Russia and destroy your kid's future. Now, if you want to join the Russian army, that's one quick way to get citizenship. Non-citizens cannot serve in the Russian army. So what that means is you sign the contract, you go to basic training. Once you're done with your basic training, you get your citizenship, and then you go serve your 1-year term post basic training. Well, you can do a 2-3 year contract if you want to, but minimum contract is 1 year, and after basic training, you will automatically get your citizenship. So that's a fast route, and then your whole family can get it through you. So that's the reality of it. So again, if you think that you're going to flee Russia as a criminal, don't bother. You're not. And more likely, you're going to get handed over to the authorities in your country. And yes, Interpol will get checked. Now, if it's Interpol can also, it depends what it is. If it looks like political type persecution, you can probably file for asylum seeker, and depending on how you do it. Like, for example, Tara Reid, who I know personally, she was under threat from being murdered by the Biden regime. So she got asylum. Quite a few other people have gotten asylum the same way, because they were basically politically repressed or under threat in their home countries. That's one way. Again, if you have drug problems, don't bother. You've got now. I consider Russia the best country in the world. I'm not going to hide that. Is it a perfect country? No. We have problems, of course, like any country has. The only place you're going to have utopia is with God and not on earth. So don't think that this is going to be a utopia, an answer to all your problems. Maybe an answer to a lot of your problems, but it doesn't mean you're not going to have difficulties. Everybody does. And the first difficulty you're going to have is assimilating. Not because Russians are so difficult to assimilate, but you will need to assimilate. If you don't have Russian, finding work is going to be difficult, especially outside the big cities. And even in the big cities, you need to have some Russian. And if you're going to live here, you need to have Russian. Now, your kids, you can do homeschooling. You don't have to send your kids to school. There is homeschooling. But, and here's the big but, it has to match the minimal federal requirements, and Russian's part of that. So if you think you're just going to homeschool your kids in English and they're going to need Russian, you're doing them a huge disservice. They're going to need Russian. And the best way kids pick up Russian is socializing. Quite literally, a small child will pick up a language and be fluent in it within a year. And within 6 months, he's already going to be talking circles around you. Trust me. Kids are like that. But they're going to have to socialize. And that's the only way that happens. And watching television, watching television actually helps quite a bit, and it helps with the pronunciation, because you're hearing the language being spoken not by you and your broken pronunciation, but by actual speakers. People will help you, but they're going to expect you to learn Russian, because that's just how we are. We have our language, we have our culture. If you come here, we'll help you, but we expect that you're going to assimilate and then just form enclaves and live without assimilation. That doesn't fly too well. So just expect that. English speakers get away with that to some degree in the big cities because there are other English speakers. But believe me, it becomes very difficult sooner than later to get around, to get services and everything else. You go to medical services, probably, especially outside the big cities, they're not going to have English speakers. Now, again, you need to have Russian to have some degree of communication. So that's just going to be part of it. You can keep your own, you can keep your Catholic or Protestant religion. Nobody's going to force convert you to Orthodoxy. But the culture is Orthodox. The majority of Christians, out of Christians, I'd say 90+% are Orthodox Christians. So that's just how it is. So, if that sounds good, if making sure your kids have a future, a bright future, and nobody's going to come after your kids, and nobody's going to do the grooming gangs like they have in the UK. Nobody's going to chop your boys' nuts off or force your girl into being a man or whatever other million genders they come up with tomorrow. If you want a conservative Christian culture, a culture where you can get on a public bus, and you'll see a bus driver that has an icon of Christ or maybe a cross hanging there, and nobody tells them to take that off. Things like that. Then Russia's the place to be. It's that simple. So there's your opportunity. Take it if you want it, but go in with the eyes wide open. Cheers. God bless.